Just before inviting Fabrizio up, I just want to say that it's a great honor and pleasure to welcome Fabrizio Ricciardelli as our keynote speaker today. Fabrizio has been a frequent visitor to SACI and has generously lectured and shared his knowledge with our students in the past. We are grateful to you, Fabrizio, for making the time to meet the master's students beforehand and to learn about their interests and pursuits at SACI before coming to this commencement. For everyone to know, Fabrizio is the director of Kent State University Florence Center. His main field of study is Italian city-states in the social economic, political and cultural landscapes of medieval Europe. Some of his many publications include The Politics of Exclusion in Early Renaissance Italy, 2007, The Culture of Violence in Renaissance Italy, 2012, The Myth of Republicanism in Renaissance Italy, 2015. A native of Florence, Fabrizio earned his undergraduate degree in medieval history at the University of Florence and his Ph.D. at the University of Warwick in England. He very recently published a short history of Florence in 2019. We are very fortunate to have Fabrizio here to share his thoughts and experience with our graduating students.
Am I too tall? Hopefully not. Thank you very much for this opportunity, first of all. I would like to thank all those from SACI here, starting from Dr. Antonia Rinaldi, who first called me and asked me to try to give a sort of fil rouge to the 3 dissertations which would have been discussed at SACI, you know, in hot, very warm July 2019. And thank very much Steven Brittan for this invitation as well. So when you presented your dissertations, I was really impressed by being automatically brought into what is my field of study, in other words, which is the Renaissance. So I'm a Renaissance historian by trade, and I've dedicated almost all my life to the city of Florence as the outpost of the democratic values which would have been shared, you know, among the new countries such as America at the end of the 1800s and the beginning of the following century, for having them given back to our society in a sort of rewritten democratic way of intending the Western civilization. While I was reading the abstract of your presentations, I was also impressed by the fact that there is a fil rouge, which is probably has been taught by your advisor in advance, because all of them are more or less tailoring all the research within the city of Florence and the archival sources, which are probably the only possible way for reading art history, and the humanities in general, let's say. And then there is the other aspect, that this is the vice of the historian, you know, reading everything chronologically, I would say. So there is also a chronological evolution of the three dissertations. I would like to subvert what has been announced by Maria Antonia, on starting with Elizabeth, of course, because of chronological reasons. The refectory, you know, it leads me straight to the 1400s Florence and the following century. So the moment in which Florence is mostly controlled by a sort of crypto-signoria, we would say in Italian, you know, launched by Cosimo the Elder from the 1430s until Lorenzo the Magnificent at the end of his life in 1492, and in which the values of republicanism, you know, stressed and coming out from the, you know, the streets of Florence, you know, with these workshops and people who are commissioned of arts continuously. I'm thinking to Taddeo Gaddi, you know, the refectory in Santa Croce and the Cenacolo and so on. And here we create a sort of paradigmatic example which would have been continued in the following stages of the Florentine history for entering straight into the idea and the category of the Western civilization, which is my fil rouge tonight, I hope, if I'm logic from the beginning. Because everything is tailored within the idea of Christianity, evidently. So Christianity is giving the engine to this society. Sometimes my students ask me, why do we have so many Madonnas with children in 14 and 1500s Florence? It's not only because we are in love with religion. It's evidently because, there is an anxiety for salvation in this society, which is making patronage entering straight into the background of the society, which is that of Christianity. The second one is the Leas, of course, because Artemisia Gentileschi leads me straight to the following step of the Florentine history, which is the passage, the change between the city-state as a republican system into a ducal regime from the 1530s, when Alessandro I, followed by Cosimo I in 1537, transformed the city of Florence into a duchy, a ducal regime. And of course, Artemisia Gentileschi at the beginning of the 1600s, 17th century, is a woman who paints. Well, that's very strange, I would say. And this makes me thinking back to Baldassare Castiglione, the third book of the Courtier, written in 1508 and then published in 1523, in which women have a big and important role after centuries. Finally, women have, the attention of scholars. And Baldassare Castiglione probably is the source through which then Artemisia Gentileschi and many others followed the idea of having the chance of expressing themselves like men had done for centuries. So I'm a political historian. When I read the sentences of exclusion, you quoted my first book, the Politics of Exclusion. When I went in the Provisione, in the Archive of Florence, all the sentences are given male line. Women are never counted. So from the 1500s, because of many reasons, because of the ability of certain intellectual scholars of giving to women a certain kind of role, very important role in the society, we have artists like Artemisia Gentileschi expressing themselves at the beginning of the 1600s. The third one is, of course, Catiline's Americas, and the court of the Medici family. And this leads me straight to my field, because of what I'm studying now in these hours, in these weeks. Because the Renaissance has been reiterated by the US, by America. The reason why we are here is because we have a political, economical investment, from the 1930s, Smith College, until the 1950s with Harvard and many other programs, the study abroad, which is, what is the study abroad? What is SACI? What is Kent State? What is this? It's evidently the effect, the consequence, the evolution, of a process which starts with the people like Elia Volpi at the end of the 1800s, at the beginning of the 19th century. Antique dealers, who were interested in the Renaissance, Mark Twain's The Gilded Age, and the idea of legitimizing the billionaire who were expressing themselves in the U.S. I'm thinking of the Frick collection, the Bloomington collection, and so on and so forth. Those who were here stealing the Renaissance, absorbing the Renaissance, making the Renaissance theirs, importing this Renaissance in the U.S., and then giving the chance, because of a series of historical reasons, I'm thinking about the period between the First and the Second World War, of the creation of the category of the Western civilization, because many Jews moved from Europe, to avoid Nazism and the persecutions in the U.S. I'm thinking to Panofsky, or many others, Hans Baron, and so on. And this is the real richness of America nowadays. Because these people, with their approach, of course, determined and created what I was telling about before, the category of the Western civilization, which is the reason why the values of the Renaissance, and here I go back to the 1400s, to the Medici, to Cosimo, to Piero, to Lorenzo, and so on, are giving us the chance of talking and discussing the concept of the ideal city. So what do we do? So why are we here? The scope, the reason, the message of every historian, art historian, humanist in general, I think that all of us is trying to design, determine, probably understand or envision the idea of the ideal society, the ideal city. And this goes, makes me think into the end of the 1400s, in which this anxiety of the creation of the perfect and ideal society is making everything happen. You know, so it's the sources we are reading in the archive of Florence, and I'm talking about Florence because we don't have any other possible comparison with other realities in Europe, unfortunately for us, historians. But should you search something like this in Venice or in Rome, you won't find the same kind of quality of sources. That's probably the reason why we have so many PhD students involved in Florentine history instead of in other fields. You know, it's giving us the chance of talking about the relationship between the private and the public. You know? So the citizen, the guildsmen, those who were involved and enrolled in a guild, contributed to the society. A society which is perfect in itself, even if it's full of contradictions in terms, you know, I'm always interested in studying the dark side of the moon, no? To quote the Pink Floyd, dark side of the Renaissance, which is exile, exclusion. But within exile, you have the legitimization of those who were active in the society. And the other fil rouge, which links the three of you, is the idea of patronage. So the idea of commissioning art, or better, let me rephrase this concept, spending money virtuously. No? So this kind of continuous interaction between the private and the public. So we have a variety of themes, because that's my mission today, trying to wrap up, try to absorb all the messages which are around within your, and evidently the category of Florence is on the top, you know, and of course with it the idea of the Renaissance. The values of the Renaissance are, you know, the Renaissance means rebirth, as we all know, and within the idea of the rebirth, we have this kind of, which has been codified by Giorgio Vasari at the beginning of the 1500s with La vita degli artisti, dei famosi artisti. We have this kind of reaction to the so-called Dark Age. So this kind of continuous evolution within the progress which is leading again and again the society into the spotlight of innovation. I can go ahead, you know, as long as you would want. But I think that these are the elements which are in front of us. What is making these citations possible is the real identity and nature of the city of Florence. And the city of Florence is, first of all, in itself, a proto-democratic society. No? It's a society in which people could express themselves. So at the end of the 1500s, we also have the heritage of Florence giving to female painters the possibility of expressing themselves. And without a perfect and ideal society, you don't have any art. It is evident that you don't have any art. So art, as well as poetry and everything, is determined by the ability of the society itself to manage itself and creating itself as a virtuous system in which people could regenerate themselves and share ideas. So this happens very early in Florence. So you were quoting the fact that I was making some publicity now. So for my birthday, July 19, 2019, has been published my short history of Florence, which has been designed for undergraduate students. And this is the fil rouge of this small book, divided in 15 lectures. It's something, nothing more than the idea of Florence in itself. Florence is the outpost of democracy because for many reasons, no one is able to become a tyrant. No, we don't have any tyranny determined in Florence. And because tyranny is is the end of everything. So you don't have any more the possibility of expressing yourself. You have a continuous turnover among politicians, among people who are coming out from the world of work, from the world of artists, from the world of professionals and so on, who gave to people like Dante Alighieri, like Boccaccio, like Petrarch, like Michelangelo in 1488, at the age of 13. Michelangelo was adopted by Lorenzo the Magnificent, who established the first school for artists for free. Huh? So Michelangelo didn't have the money for paying the tuition fees of that school. And Lorenzo was used to walking around these young artists trying to find the talents. And Michelangelo was counting a fund, a faun, with the teeth. He was 13 years old. And Lorenzo told him, okay, so fawns are supposed to be old men. Or why do you leave the teeth in the mouth of a faun? So the following day, so Lorenzo passed around, and the teeth were not anymore in the mouth. So probably Michelangelo would have been the great speaker, the great voice of the greatness of the Medici family. So without the Medici, in this case, absorbing and representing the idea and the nature of Florence and its republicanism, probably Michelangelo could not express himself, no? Coming out from a very poor family and becoming the artist we know. So it is Florence, the real element which is in front of us. And it is the Renaissance, the period in which the values of the idea of investing money and spending money virtuously gives to all of us the possibility of reading these fantastic sources which had been turned into your dissertation during the last year. Thank you very much.